Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is a book review. So I've read Jane Austen's Emma, which was published in 1815. So I am kind of working my way through the Jane Austen books. So these are the ones that I'm up to so far. I've got Lady Susan, Persuasion, Pride and Prejudice and Emma. There's not actually that many. There's only really 6 full novels because she died when she was only 41. So I'm just sort of taking a casual stroll through the garden of Jane Austen. And I have to say, reading Emma was a bit like taking a casual stroll in a garden. Like, it felt quite enjoyable and quite pleasant, but it wasn't that thrilling because it didn't feel like all that much happens. Certainly when I compare it to like Pride and Prejudice, it feels like a lot more happens in Pride and Prejudice and like 100 less pages. Obviously these are slightly different editions. This one's like a bit sexy with the corset, but yeah, there just isn't not as much, it felt to me, going on in the Book of Emma. Emma is the only of Jane Austen's novels to have the name of the heroine in the title, and the way that we're introduced to Emma in the very first sentence of the book is: Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. So that's a fairly famous opening line of a book as well. So unlike the other heroines in Austen's novels, Emma is clearly very rich, and she is basically a lady of leisure and doesn't have actually very much to do apart from stay in the evenings with her father, who is anxious about his health, and play cards with him, or maybe take a stroll down to the local shop to buy some ribbon or something. Her sister has moved out several years earlier and is married and living in London with her husband and children, and her former governess, with whom she became very close, has just recently, at the start of the book, she has just got married to a local businessman. So Emma is just kind of left kind of alone, bored and lonely, and that's kind of what the sort of theme of the book is, I suppose. And I suppose an idle mind is the devil's plaything or whatever, and Emma begins to daydream, fantasize, scheme, particularly about matchmaking, because she gives herself credit, at least partial if not full credit, for introducing Miss Taylor, her former governess, to Mr. Weston, the businessman that she ended up marrying, and their happy, successful marriage. She decides that she wants to have a go with some more matchmaking, and the focus of most of her attention is the young Harriet Smith, only 17 at the start of the book, and Emma is only 20. They're all just always so young in these books. It's a bit distressing. Harriet Smith is the illegitimate daughter of a tradesman who is wealthy enough that he's been able to secretly pay for her education. She is described several times in the book as being very beautiful, very pretty, but she's quite unsophisticated, and she gives Emma this wide-eyed kind of deference that Emma really appreciates. So they become very close friends, although there is clearly a dynamic between them given their different class statuses. So Emma plans for Harriet to marry Mr. Elton, who is the young vicar in the town. So she manages to convince Harriet that she is in love with Mr. Elton and him with her, and even convinces Harriet to turn down an offer of marriage from a young farmer that she knows who is genuinely in love with her. Mr. Elton then turns round and proposes to Emma. Emma has a flirtation with a man called Frank Churchill, who is the son of the aforementioned Mr. Weston, and then she realises that she doesn't really have much of an attachment to him anyway, which turns out to be a good thing, lucky for her. But she tacitly encourages Harriet to pursue a relationship with Frank Churchill, believing that Harriet has an attraction to him. Only it then turns out that Harriet was actually meaning another man, Mr. Knightley, much to Emma's distress. Mr. Knightley is a close family friend. He is handsome, kind, clever, and a gentleman, and two things. One, he's really wealthy, which is very important in these books, and he owns the Donwell estate, which is like most of Highbury, the town, it seems. And he's the only person in the book that really stands up to Emma or criticises her or ever suggests there might be anything wrong with her personality or the way that she's going about things. So you can kind of see where that's going. Jane Austen definitely liked a happy ending for her leading characters and everything to be kind of tied up nicely at the end. I don't know if I really enjoyed the writing in Emma as much as in Pride and Prejudice. There's nothing really that jumped out at me that I disliked, and certainly it's a very accessible, she's a very accessible writer for one of the classic authors. There was nothing particularly that I disliked, but Emma the character is nowhere near as likeable as, say, Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice is. And there doesn't seem to be as much happening in the plot, and there's just kind of a lot of waffle in the writing style, which kind of surprised me. There's a lot of things like, oh, they were going to go for a walk, but then someone said it might be raining later, so then they decided not to go for a walk, but then actually it didn't turn out to rain, so then they went for their walk after all. And it's just a lot of that seems to be like filling quite a lot of the pages. It just felt a little bit like filler, dare I say it. So I just didn't quite grab me in the same way. I think there's also less dialogue, and like Pride and Prejudice has quite a bit more dialogue, and I do like dialogue. It's quite easy to read. It's quite quick and easy to read. So maybe that's the difference as well. Emma the character has a strong sense of class status. For this you can pretty much read snob. And in fact the real reason that she gives, or the reason that she gives to Harriet when she dissuades her from marrying Mr. Martin, the local farmer, even though they both are actually in love with each other, is that she could never go and visit her living on a farm, and she could never go and visit Mrs. Martin living on whatever farm. But if she turned down the offer of marriage, then she would continue to be able to be friends with Harriet. And so that's very compelling for Harriet, who doesn't want to lose that friendship. And it does seem like a bit of a not great move. She's not the best friend at that moment in the book, really. I didn't really think, I know that Emma kind of goes on, she has a kind of redemptive arc throughout the book, and she kind of learns the error of her ways with her scheming and her meddling and her matchmaking, and then she's not actually as aware and intelligent as perhaps she thought, and you know, but she still ends the book, I think, being as class aware, class status aware as she started it, and I don't know, it's just less likeable than you kind of want. But I'm reading this with like a modern sensibility, and I do think that they toned that down for the TV adaptations, definitely the ones that I've seen. I don't think it's as apparent, because I think it would have come across a lot less likeable. I can tell that I'm losing my light. It's like evening time and the light is going outside. I'm nearly done, I promise. So I did grow up watching the TV adaptations of Jane Austen books, and like the BBC kind of mini-series thing that they did for Pride and Prejudice, we watched like a million times, and I watched the Kate Beckinsale Emma. I also watched the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma, but I didn't like it as much. One thing is that they all seem like too old in that version, and they are, well, Mr. Knightley is quite a bit older than Emma. He's 37 and she's only 20, 21. But yeah, all the heroines in Jane Austen's are all really young, and they often seem too old. Anyway, I did grow up watching all these and enjoyed them, and I do think with classics that can often help for you to have an idea at least of the plot and the characters. But like I said, Jane Austen is very accessible, so I'm not sure that you actually necessarily need that before you go in, but I do find it is helpful, but in some ways it kind of colours your reading of it, because I'm thinking back to the, like, well, Kate Beckinsale did it like this in the TV version. Also, if you've seen the film Clueless, Clueless is an adaptation of Emma. So Cher in Clueless is Emma, from Emma. I guess Dion would be like her Miss Taylor, although not married, obviously, in Clueless. And then you have Ty in Clueless would be like Harriet Smith, who kind of is taken under Cher's wing a little bit. And then, is it Travis? Is the boy, the skater boy that Ty wants to date and Cher tells her not to, so that would be like Mr. Martin the farmer. Christian in Clueless, who turns out to be gay, but who Cher is kind of attracted to, would be like Frank Churchill, who is not gay in the book, obviously. They're not that progressive. And then like Josh, who is her former stepbrother, is in Clueless, is like Mr. Knightley, who in Emma is, so Mr. Knightley's brother is married to Emma's sister, so they do, you know, it's not quite the same, but still they're quite close. Anyway, it's just quite funny when I was reading the book finally, after watching Clueless numerous times and watching like the Kate Beckinsale TV film a million times, to be thinking of like Clueless and the Emma adaptations whilst actually reading the book. Yeah, it's just quite funny. But I liked the book. I got back into reading Jane Austen, or got into reading Jane Austen after watching some YouTube videos about Austen and about her use of language and also the plot and the characters, and also like just culturally, you know, an understanding of what life was like at the time does help with reading these books. And that made me want to read the books, and then I really did appreciate Austen's writing after reading like Pride and Prejudice and also Persuasion. I held up that one for Pride and Prejudice before, didn't I? That's Persuasion. I just realised the bodice one is Persuasion, the bonnet one is Pride and Prejudice. I know. Lost the plot. Okay, yes, these YouTube videos got me back into reading it, and so then when I was reading like other inferior authors and lesser books, I would be reading thinking like, oh, this is not as good as Austen, and I realised that I was comparing other authors to Jane Austen, so that's when I realised I had a real appreciation for her. And I will say, I don't think that would have been the case after reading Emma. I preferred the others that I've read, but I've still got like Sense and Sensibility to go, is probably the next one, or yeah, that's probably the next one. So we'll see. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments about Emma, and give me a like and a subscribe for more of these videos.